done for. Everyone get out.
Greetings, sailors. Welcome to what is technically a viewer replay for World of Warships, but it's a name that's very, very familiar to you if you've been watching the stream over the last couple of months. It's MrConway. So, yeah, he's a viewer of my channel, but he's much more known, I think, for being on the stream and for being a community manager these days for wargaming as well. Now, before everyone starts screaming, bribery and favoritism, well, yes, there was bribery and favoritism. He has promised me several Tirpitzes for my ports, so that if one gets sunk, I can just jump into another one, and an autographed photo of Ektar's beard. So how could I say no to an offer like that? Man, if I get him into trouble for saying that, I mean, obviously it's a joke, but you never know. I mean, Ektar famously has no sense of humour, so... we'll see. Anyway, so Zircon is in the Otago there, the other tier 8 premium that's currently in the game, and the only one that you can actually go and buy in-game. It's not bad, I recently got one myself. The biggest letdown for me is really the rate of fire. It's a floating citadel along with the other Japanese cruisers. I think that's just what you have to get used to if you're playing a higher tier Japanese cruiser. And the guns are nice. But yeah, the rate of fire is actually lower than my tier 6 Aoba, although it has more guns than the Aoba, so it kind of makes up for it, but it still feels rather low. Snooze, meanwhile, is in the New Orleans. I don't really know much about it. I know it's got pretty good anti-aircraft capabilities, and in principle, Snooze spends a lot of the battle sticking near Conway to try and give him anti-aircraft support, but it doesn't quite work out at times. As you saw at the beginning, and I'm trying to remember to do that with my Warships matches, to put in that loading screen so you can see what the matchups are. This is pretty good matchmaking, but there are tier 9s on each side, including a couple of Izumos, and both carriers are tier 9 as well. So that could well be an issue. Those tier 9 carriers, especially the Japanese ones, they get a lot of torpedo bombers to work with, so maybe that could be painful. Maybe other people will take the brunt of the pain. We'll see. So this is a domination mode, and both bits of the team, because on this particular map the team starts all split up, they're trying to link up, and this is kind of the accepted sensible strategy, and if you can get it to work, it works very well, because they've basically got this bit of this team trapped in a pocket between them. But if you look up in the northwest of the map, of course, the remains of the enemy team are also pressing up behind our team in the north. So you have to be reasonably quick about this stage. If you can trap this pocket of ships and just use overwhelming firepower to bring them down, then you can deal a serious blow to the enemy team. But it's not like they're going to be sitting idly by and letting that happen, ideally. So he's had a couple of citadels already. The damage counter didn't register one of them, and the damage counter mod that I'm using, which is part of Aslain's World of Warships mod pack. I should actually start putting that bit of information in my World of Warships description blurb, I suppose, what mods I've got in exactly. But it's basically a minimap mod and a damage counter mod. It's not that much. But yeah, it doesn't count everything. It doesn't count fire damage, and it does occasionally miss some shots. So it will give you a rough idea of the damage that Conway is doing. It's not 100% accurate. It's not quite the whole total, but it will at least keep tabs on what he's doing with his guns and torpedoes for the most part. So he's actually already gotten 1 kills already, and that's an easy 30k damage. And the Tirpitz is particularly good at taking unwary cruisers that give you their broadside. But to be fair, these cruisers and now these remaining this remaining battleship, they don't have a lot of choice. Whichever way they go, they're going to be exposing their side to fire, and it's a bit of a nasty position to be in. But this is basically they weren't pushing. They kind of milled around in this area and let the enemy team push on them, and it's only really the enemies in the north that are pushing. Whereas if they'd pushed up in the north and tried to link up with their friendlies who were pushing up from the north, this might have been a very different initial engagement. And yes, that maybe is something you should have paid to a little bit earlier, Conway. That was a very, very narrow miss indeed. So anyway, they've killed almost all but one ship. I mean, this Atlanta's about to go down. There we go. But the team that has been pressing down from the north, they're not doing so well. They've actually lost a couple of ships. In fact, they've just lost another one. The only real survivor of that northern flank is the Izumo, but that's useful. The Izumo is a very powerful ship, and the enemy Izumo is very much still alive as well. So if they can keep their Tier 9 battleship alive, that will be a powerful asset. So they've got 2 cap points, and this game mode is all about the cap points. It's very important. You don't just need to get the kills, you need to capture the points as well. And all too often I see teams that just ignore the cap points and lose badly because of it. You can't afford to do that. So when the enemy team starts pressuring the B point, it's time to go round and defend it, basically. Because at the moment, well, the carrier's kind of down there but staying safe behind an island. They've got an Otago who isn't going to be able to hold back 2 battleships. In fact, 2 battleships and a cruiser. So the platoon here, or the division, I suppose technically, decide to collectively turn around and deal with that. But this has the downside of it's leaving the Pensacola and the Izumo alone against those ships pressing down from the north. So they're kind of trusting that those guys will stay alive and that the Pensacola will be able to give sufficient air cover to the Izumo against the enemy carrier. But it's a bit of a risky maneuver, because sometimes being in a platoon, I mean, there's a reason it's limited to only 3 players. You can, even still with only 3 players, quite powerfully influence the outcome of a battle by having that kind of coordination, especially if you're using something like TeamSpeak. So if an entire platoon decides to turn around and do something, that can have a significant impact, both positive and negative, on the game. It's not, it goes both ways. That sword cuts both ways. So them going to defend B is important, and yes, Conway, that's an island. You probably don't want to run into that. Although, to be fair, I still do that after hundreds of battles, but anyway. So yeah, a platoon turning around to, defend B, which is fairly reasonable, that has consequences in that the Izumo and the Pensacola are now alone and outnumbered, and so their firepower is all concentrated in completely different directions, but they are taking down these enemy 3 ships. So that's kind of important in of itself. This was both a situation where it was positive and negative all at the same time, potentially. So he sees an opportunity to put some torps out against the Pensacola, and it looks like initially he's going to do a wide spread, and then he does a narrow spread. He's also got his secondaries opening up on this guy. Now he's just lost a turret temporarily, but it isn't going to be out for too long, and doesn't look like those torpedoes are going to hit, but the carrier is also turning his attention on that Pensacola as well. And the Pensacola, his best chance of doing damage to Tirpitz is basically lots and lots of HE, but at this close range, this is bad. You don't want to be doing this. And there we go, he just takes a carrier torpedo. So yeah, he is about to go down fairly hard, and there's not a lot he can do about it. I'm not quite sure why he decided engaging a Tirpitz, or really any battleship at this close range with this much health, was a good idea, because it wasn't particularly. Now, Conway could have continued his turn and gone round the south, and instead he decides to kill his speed and turn in against this island and hopefully not run aground. But if he does, it means he can potentially get support from Zircon, who has gone back up to try and flank around him and do some damage around the C cap. Now we've lost the Izumo. The Pensacola isn't going to last that much longer as well. He is getting support from the carrier in terms of fighters, but the fighters obviously can't do anything about the ships that are firing at him. The Otago looks like he's going back to kind of help as well, although I don't know. I mean, he was very cautious earlier. He wasn't directly engaging, that was sensible, but he's now kind of floating around on the J line, and he's only going to have very long range shots on the Baltimore, if at all. Meanwhile, Conway is, this was the point of him making that turn, is that he can get his other torpedo launchers on this target. Now he's done a wide spread here. He selected a wide spread. A tight spread probably would have been better, but at this range, maybe he thought... Well, I don't know what he thought. I'm sure he had his reasons for doing it, but regardless, he gets 1 hit. 2 hits, in fact, for quite a lot of damage, so... Yeah, that kind of worked out all right. MrCon, meanwhile, very, very low health at this point. He's got all kinds of enemy aircraft going after him. Snooze did continue round south, and that means he is now totally out of position to help Conway. And at this point, maybe Conway could have killed his speed a bit to let Snooze catch up. I don't know. He might just have had in mind that he wanted to help MrCon, basically, to get back into the fray and engage these enemy ships. But as you can see, MrCon is hanging on by just a slither of health there. 227 hit points, that's absolutely nothing. So, you know, the next shot that hits MrCon, the next bomb, the next torpedo, whatever, is going to kill him, unfortunately. Talking of torpedoes, that's a torpedo bomber squadron that's getting awfully close, and because Snooze isn't nearby, Conway basically has to rely on his own defences. Now, he's entirely concentrating on the Baltimore at the moment, which I think is the right thing to do. The Baltimore's rate of fire... sometimes in this kind of situation, you know, you're faced with a battleship and a cruiser, it feels like it's more often better to go after the cruiser first because they can fire that much more rapidly. Now, one of the torpedo bombers got shot down, but all 3 remaining torpedoes hit and do damage, and rather a lot of damage as well, because that was a tier 9 carrier. So that hurt, and that's especially bad when you're about to go toe-to-toe with not 1 but 2 ships. However, again, this is a close-range engagement. And yes, the Izumo could hurt him a lot, but he's unlikely to take citadel damage, because one of the features of the Tirpitz is it's very hard to citadel at close range. If you get plunging deck fire, it's much more possible, and oh, yeah, that got knocked out just at a critical moment, so he's going to switch to the other side. Put out torps against the Baltimore, but it's very, very hard at these close range, in these close range engagements, to actually citadel a Tirpitz, because the citadels are basically below the waterline. So he's put one lot of torps out, he puts the other lot of torps out. You know, this is either going to be terrible and he's going to die, or it's going to be glorious. And there we go, the Baltimore manoeuvring to avoid, he's keeping his guns on the guy, and there we go, finishes him off with the torpedo. And bam! Look at that! Oh, you know, torpedoes, no problem. And he only just narrowly avoids another carrier torpedo drop from a single torpedo plane. So that was, oh, I don't even know, like the mix of emotions that must have been going through his mind then. The sheer amount of adrenaline pumping through his bloodstream. And he's not out of the woods yet. He's got this Tirpitz to contend with. He's on fire for at least another couple of seconds. He's very, very low health. He's lost a turret entirely, one of his rear turrets, and his only real ace in the hole is the fact that the carrier is helping him, and has helped him rather a lot, so that's evened the battlefield rather nicely. This enemy Tirpitz is now just as low health, and more importantly, he is side on, whereas Conway is bow on, and at this kind of close ranges that makes him harder to hit. Now, the enemy Tirpitz put torpedoes out, and Conway is in a position to avoid those rather nicely. If it had been a widespread, possibly it would have been a little... well, actually, it probably would have just as easy to avoid even. Wow, words. But unfortunately, the carrier decided to have another go at him, and you can only avoid torpedo spreads from so many directions. So that was that. All it was going to take was 1. But that one instant where he got a Confederate high caliber and a double strike all in the space of like 2 seconds, that was incredible. That is the Tirpitz driver's dream, just to drive in between two ships and unleash torpedoes like that. Hell, I've been trying to do that in a destroyer for absolutely ages, and I still haven't managed it yet. I came close with the Nicholas at one stage, but sadly one of the ships was a bit too wily for me and managed to avoid things entirely. But yeah, that was just... oh. I mean, his battle's over now, but he probably had to go and sit in a corner and, you know, breathe deeply into a paper bag, because that was some engagement. And it's a pity that Snooze wasn't a bit closer to help with the anti-aircraft, but I think it would have required Conway to deliberately slow down to allow Snooze to catch up with him, because the Tirpitz is not a slow ship by any means. It's got a pretty decent turn of speed. So we're now down to this enemy carrier, and Snooze is very sensibly capping this this point, because at the moment they are actually ahead in points. If it just was, you know, if we ran out of time, the enemy team at this stage, you know, if they hadn't capped this point, if they didn't cap this point, it would be a win on points, because that's how this game mode works. If you run out of time, whoever has the most points at the point of running out of time wins. Now, Snooze, yeah, this torpedo bomber squadron coming for him, and unfortunately he runs himself aground in the process, but because he's got good anti-aircraft capabilities, and I think he's probably set off his defensive fire capability as well, he only takes one, and normally running aground's a bit dangerous, but in this case it kind of helped because he was able to force them to drop their torpedoes wider, and it meant that they could only drop their torpedoes on him from one direction, and they would have had to basically circle all around him. Now, unfortunately, one of the torpedo bombers did circle all around him. His repair is on cooldown at the moment, so that second hit, although he's still got a reasonable amount of health left, look how fast it goes down. He's now flooding. And this is why flooding is very, very dangerous. And this is why destroyer captains, cruiser captains, and even carrier captains will try and set people on fire first, because if you can get somebody to be on fire, to extinguish the fire, and then you can hit them with a torpedo so that they flood, that is going to be worth a lot more damage than if you flood them, they repair that, and then set them on fire. It's always preferable to do it that way round rather than what I just described. That was some good wording there. That was some very good wording. So this enemy carrier is almost out of planes at this point. He's also being attacked by our carrier, who has been no slouch throughout this battle. And as you can see, that enemy Tai-Ho has not got a lot of health left now at this point at all. So even though we're down to the last 2 minutes, I mean, this looks fairly solidly like it's going to be a win. If nothing else, we're ahead on points now, and it looks like this carrier is almost out of offensive planes, and he's probably almost out of fighters as well, because he's been desperately trying to defend himself, and apparently a single group of 2 fighters is all he could put aloft. So it's basically a race to see if it's going to be Snooze or this Otago that gets the final kill. And I don't know what ammo Snooze has loaded up here. I mean, personally, in this kind of situation, I would go for AP and try and get the Citadels, because the setting the guy on fire isn't really a priority at this stage. It's just about doing as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible. And you can see there, the Otago, it's not a slow ship at all. So the guy comes into view, and that's a couple of shots into the bow, probably over pens, but the Otago gets the kill rather than Snooze. So there we go. That ends that battle. So, as we can see from the results, 1 million credits. 1 million. 1 million credits. Yeah. I mean, obviously this was with a premium account, but and possibly a flag to get more credits, but still, 1 million credits. 3,500 base XP. I mean, he had to work bloody hard for it, I'll say that. Even though, obviously, you know, being a premium ship helps, and the Tai-Ho, unsurprisingly, in second place. But he had to do 200,000 damage, just over 200,000 damage to get that. And yeah, he really did have to work very hard for it. And he maybe made 1 or 2 mistakes at times. I mean, personally, I probably would have waited for Snooze to catch up because of the threat of the enemy carrier. And maybe, I don't even know. It's always easy to sit and second guess, you know, after the fact. But regardless of any tactical analysis, it was a hell of a match, and that one ultra intense moment alone, facing off against the Izumo and the Baltimore, that was just, oh, that is something that every Tirpitz owner is going to dream of doing, and hopefully someday I'll be able to do that myself. We'll see. So if you enjoyed this this particular high intensity Tirpitz game, you can leave any comments below, you can hit the like button, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.